So with that, good morning once again to everyone. I am your chairman, Julius Barcelona. Thank you very much for joining us today. There are currently 18 of us, but we do expect more people to join in a little bit later. Once more, if you are joining us 2 weeks later on our YouTube channel, thank you very much for being with us today. And we do hope that you would consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel and following us on our social media. MAP-ABCDF is a member-supported nonprofit organization. And if you do like what we do and you'd like to support us in what we do, please consider joining us as a member. If you'd like to be a member, you can look at our description for details on how to join us. Just send us an email and let's get to know each other. Okay, so without further ado, is our guest speaker here? Is our guest speaker here yet?
Iris. Iris, any update?
He is logging in, ma'am, and also another Minda member is also logging in just in case he would have a hard time logging in.
Is that
So,
Indira?
Not Indira, Raymond Esperat
Yeah.
is also logging in because he
Okay.
also has a serious presentation.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Well, while you're waiting, Julius, just for clarity, when you say YouTube channel, just in case people are not on YouTube and they're listening live, to get to the YouTube channel, please give us instruction. Just type YouTube and then MAP-ABCDF. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. If you are looking for our YouTube channel, just go onto YouTube and then type in MAP-ABCDF, and that should show you our channel and the videos that we have been uploading recently.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Facebook, they list there all the seminars for the last couple of months. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
If you do go onto Facebook on our social media, and also look for MAP-ABCDF, and you will find our Facebook page with the details of all of our previous seminars as well.
Right.
And just
Okay.
to share with the group, since
Yes, please,
we're
Bernie.
waiting for them, yeah. Recently, I think last week, we got a request from one of our speakers sometime 2017 who talk about making money from the rise and fall of financial movements. So he said, I think he has his PowerPoint presentation, but he wanted the minutes of our meeting. So we were able to keep it in our previous website. And he requested that a copy be forwarded to him because I think all that he said happened.
Great.
So
And I
it's
thank
nice documentation, yeah.
and I thank Bernie because these minutes, I read them. I read the last 3 months. It's very extensive. It's not anywhere right now. It's just with her. So when the website is open, well, it depends on our chairman how he wants to do it, but it's very rich. Okay, so we're still waiting, Iris?
yes, sir.
Yes. In the meantime, have you loaded the presentation onto us? Can he load it himself when he comes on?
I think already he will be assisted by somebody
Okay,
who's also logging in together with him.
good, together. Okay, right. Okay, well, anyway, just to let you know about him, basically, he's Romeo Montenegro, Deputy Executive Director of the Mindanao Integrated Authority. He has been with the government serving under all administrations since President Ramos, and he has a master's in public administration from Ateneo de Davao, and of course went to different executive programs in the University of Asia and the Pacific and the National University of Singapore. That's 25 years in government, from President Ramos to President Marcos Jr. As you know, the forum will cover Mindanao's viability as an investment destination. And in fact, when it comes to agriculture, that is our main group that can really push this because of several factors. It has also been getting too small a share of the national budget. he will also talk about the BIPYAGA. I was extremely involved in the founding of that. BIPYAGA is Brunei, Darussalam, Indonesia, Malaysia. It's a subgroup of ASEAN, and it's the East Asian ASEAN group area. It talks of a sub-regional cooperation within the region. And we'll talk about extending peace development work there. So is he in? Not yet. Iris, just tell us when he's in. In the
Yes,
meantime,
sir.
yeah, okay. In the meantime, Bernie or the Vice President Vicky or Julius, anything you'd like to say about Mindanao's development and opportunities, which can be a little bit, helpful in terms of focusing our discussion today. Julius or Vicky, Vice President?
Sure.
Any thought?
Vicky, you want to go first, or will I say something first? Oh, I think that's him coming in right now.
Oh, good. Okay. I will say a
Go
couple of
ahead,
things.
Julius.
Okay.
I think our speaker is
well-
in ready.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
just so that he's currently trying to join audio, but no, Mindanao I think has been a fairly underrated area. There are already a lot of good agricultural developments, but mostly on the multinational and large corporate farming side. So one of the main things that I've seen in my travels to Mindanao and my work to Mindanao is that because of the dominance of these large corporate farms, the smaller farmers actually tend to be a bit what do you call this, a little overlooked. So in Bukidnon, that's not the case. In Bukidnon, that's where most of the smallholder farming is done, and mostly in Cotabato as well. So those are the areas that I mostly end up working in, dealing with vegetable farmers in those areas. But there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done. They don't have a lot of access to, say, public goods. The
Julius,
logistics
excuse, I
infrastructure
think
there is still not
ASEC Romeo is in. Let's welcome him.
okay. Sige.
Mr.
Aztec?
Recall, ask permission for 1 or 2 minutes before ASEC Romy Montenegro starts. May I use those few minutes?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. The chair has allowed me to give a couple of minutes, and it's really to orient our speaker to our objective here. And see, I'm supposed to give the introduction, and the chair runs the forum. In that introduction, I always state that our objective here is not only to transfer technology knowledge, but following our departed Chair Emeritus Ramon Ilsore's directive before he died. He said, when you do these forums, try to make sure that something happens after it. Try to fulfill our objective of country development and poverty reduction, and therefore have the speakers speak to us. Okay, we're students in a sense, but not just a student, but people who God has given experience and connections to, so that we can further his mission by helping him, whether it's going to banks or government officials or other businessmen. Tell the speaker that in his speech, not only educate us, but tell us how we can help promote this mission. And I like to say that Mr. Roman Montenegro is a distinguished person. I've known him since before. He's been working with the Office of the President, now he's Assistant Secretary, and of course, Deputy Executive of Mindanao Integrated Authority. So welcome, Romy Montenegro. Good to see you again. And please address what our department chairman has said. As you speak to us, don't merely educate us. Tell us how we can fulfill your mission, which you're doing very well. You've been doing all these years since the Ramos presidency. But we want to support you and be your expansion in your mission. So keep in mind, we're over 20 years old, which means that we have experience. So we want you to leverage us as your tools to help you expand your mission. So welcome, Romy Montenegro. Mr. Chairman, I guess those are my few minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so thank you very much for that, President Ernie. And once more, welcome very much. And thank you very much for joining us, ASEC Romeo Montenegro. Please take it away.
Thank you very much. And of course, my respects to the great USEC of DTI since, 1996 or 1997, my first foray into government. I have known USEC Ordonez since then through administrations in terms of how he has championed many of our advocacies actually here in Mindanao. And advocacies that unfortunately up until today, in spite of a president from Mindanao in the last administration, remain to be at the forefront of our aggressive, deliberate, and purposive efforts to finally transform Mindanao into the kind of land that it ought to be, which is a land of promise, transform it to land of fulfillment. And we are thankful for this opportunity given by the Management Association of the Philippines. And we always take advantage of every opportunity to convey, communicate in Mindanao. I am doing this forum right now, right in the hospital where next to my wife, who is currently admitted for some abdominal complaints. But I cannot just send my regrets and forego this very important opportunity to be with this very important influential group, considering the fact that there is so much in Mindanao, as Yusek Ordonez said, clearly elucidated. There's so much that we still need to pursue and to advocate for in terms of realizing the promise of Mindanao. So this is what I hope would be able to convey this morning, the context of where we are and where do we move forward, and what collaboration and partnerships do we look at across all sectors, government, private, ODA, and then international partners, in terms of seeing a different lens insofar as addressing the imperatives of Mindanao. Very different from the usual template of development process that had been rammed down our throats over the past several decades of several administrations priorities. This time around, we'd like Mindanao to be seen in its real context. This is what I hope to be able to convey this morning. So let me walk you through. This is quite a particular number of slides, but I hope to be able to walk through them with you quite a bit fast, so that we will be able to have time for interaction. Then again, as pointed out in your invitation, to highlight, to focus, to underpin the importance of Mindanao all across the Philippines, being the second largest. But another important context to that that is otherwise untold is that we are much closer to any ASEAN country than Luzon. So if you looked at taking advantage of ASEAN integration, there is already BAMP-IAGA, which has been there since centuries ago, formalized by the late President Ramos, to provide the opportunity for Mindanao to demonstrate its ability to pilot test many of the protocols within ASEAN that can be started off with a cross-border cooperation we have, especially with Brunei, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Our strength is definitely our population in Mindanao. Of course, we also mirror the demographic strength that the Philippines is currently having in terms of our young, productive population. But in Mindanao, we always emphasize that we are a tri-people community, that there is Lumads, Muslims, and of course, the Christian settlers. And the way to look at planning, development, cooperation, intervention, including investments, had to take into account this very important dimension of tri-peoples aspect in Mindanao. That in Mindanao, we have to understand that we are comprised of 6 regions, 27 provinces, over 400 municipalities, and over 10,000 barangays. And so that if there is one blast incident or armed conflict happening in 1 or 2 barangays out of 10,000 barangays, it is unfair for Mindanao to be labeled as a conflict area, splashed in the front pages of national papers. When we talked about Mindanao in terms of our population, definitely we are as large as the entire continent of Australia in terms of population. We are twice bigger than Portugal and Hungary. We are half the population, of course, of the advanced economy of South Korea. We have about 10 million hectares of about 60% of that still arable area. We account for more than 1/3 of the country's farm area. That's why so much of the country's agricultural output delivered, provided, produced by Mindanao. But let us not set aside the realities of the past almost 3 years. The pandemic that had affected the way we do our normal lives. Classic example is the kind of our activity today. We would have done this under normal circumstances on a face-to-face interaction, but because of the challenges of pandemic and the new normal that we are now embracing, we are doing this online. Now, this is what we have always been stressing in terms of Mindanao in the last several decades, that Mindanao has been growing at a rate faster than the national average, especially when we started to reap the benefits of the Mindanao-specific policies introduced during the Ramos administration. It was the Ramos administrations that first laid out Mindanao-specific policy. In fact, among the first executive orders created by then late FDR was establishing the Office of the President Mindanao, chaired by then former Secretary Paul Dominguez, and the activation of the Mindanao Economic Development Council. That was the forerunner of what is today called Mindanao Development Authority. It was also during the Ramos time when the four-country cooperation, a mini ASEAN that allows for Mindanao and Palawan being the focus areas of the country, be able to directly interact on international economic interchange with international partners through Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East ASEAN. In the last recent years, on account of those stars that were aligned for Mindanao, in spite of the conflict, in spite of the all-out war in 2000, we still demonstrate resiliency, given the performance of these numbers, where in 2018 alone, we performed higher, consistent with the previous years, the recent years. The highest was at 7.1% versus national average of 6.7% across 17 regions in the Philippines. Our investments in Mindanao in the last 15 years had also gone up 10 times from how much it was in the early 2000s. This is to demonstrate again the inflow of investments in Mindanao that had been from time to time challenged by the issue of peace and order and conflict, but had demonstrated quite an impressive performance, especially after the signing of the peace agreement with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and the eventual establishment of the Bangsamoro government today. In the last 10 years alone, Mindanao had also seen the influx of the industries and the services sector. Malls, hotels, towers are rising left and right here in Davao, in Cagayan de Oro, in General Santos, and the key urban cities in Mindanao. Hence, the need for Mindanao to also keep up with the demand of electricity, and hence the rise of many power plants in Mindanao in the last 6 years to be able to cater to such economic need, particularly on energy by many of our industries. Mindanao has also become a favorite destination today by our BPO industry, noting the impressive performance of the Mindanao, or particularly the Davao call center agents, which in surveys in recent years had seen to be able to perform relatively better than their Manila counterparts. Why? Because of the better quality of living here in Mindanao and the cost of living, which is cheaper than Metro Manila. Adds up to the improved delivery of output by our performers, call center agents in the BPO industry. Plus, of course, the growing economy in many of our country destinations, the growing population also contributed to the expansion of many of our farmlands in Mindanao. And all of this, from the perspective of Minda, had to be pursued in a corridors approach, where there has to be spatial strategy. There has to be sense in terms of where to direct investors and investments and what kind of infrastructure that the national government need to deliver to be able to see the realization of these investments in specific areas in Mindanao. Areas that also had to present the comparative advantage. So if we're looking at investments related to aquaculture, fisheries, for instance, Western Mindanao Peninsula provides that opportunity with 10 largest sardine canneries in the Philippines located in Zamboanga. If we're looking at manufacturing for servicing not just internationally, but for domestic orientation, there is Northern Mindanao, where many or most of the manufacturing plants in Mindanao are located because of its proximity to Visayas and Luzon. If you're looking at the bigger aspect of food production and financial center, that's in the Davao region and South Central Mindanao. So all of these have become, fortunately, in the recent years, been made as basis by the DPWH, by the Department of Transportation, in terms of identifying priority projects in Mindanao. Because today, part of ROI packaging that we position for every proposal in Mindanao had to be leveraged with its immediate impact in terms of agriculture productivity or entry of more locators in specific areas. Hence, therefore, the need to ensure that the interconnectivity, which was first aggressively pushed during the Ramos administration for Mindanao to be physically integrated and physically connected. Many of you have traveled in Mindanao in the 70s or early 80s perhaps, so you travel from Davao to General Santos, is a severe punishment of 13 hours or 12 hours. Much more with the travel from Davao to Cagayan de Oro via Bukidnon, it's a severe punishment of 13, 14 hours. Today, we can conveniently travel to any of these areas. Davao Jensen at 3 hours or less. Davao, Cagayan de Oro via Bukidnon at 5 hours or less. Therefore, positioning Mindanao at a much better setup in terms of its interconnectivity. Although so much still needs to be done, because what we're seeing are just the connectivity of highways. What we needed to see and push forward are the connectivity of our rural areas and farm-to-market roads. The sectors in Mindanao definitely have been led by agriculture and agribusiness in terms of generating employment. And this was validated by a study done by the World Bank in partnership with Minda way back in 2014. When then former Secretary of NEDA and then World Bank Chief Economist Dr. Carl Chua partnered with Minda for the drafting of a Mindanao Jobs Report that would have laid the basis for us in Mindanao to identify where to get the jobs needed in Mindanao of around 5 million between 2016 and 2022. And so we have to look at this in that context, because 6 out of 10 jobs in Mindanao are actually related to agriculture value chain. That's why investing in agriculture, looking at Mindanao as the country's food basket, and making the government realize that it needs to continue focus along that line, is making us and giving us a perfect sense. And we're glad that the current administration had highlighted the importance of agriculture as a priority for our economic recovery, because that is essentially where Mindanao has been delivering its promise in terms of major contribution, with over 40% of the country's food trade derived from Mindanao, with 8 out of top 10 export commodities of the Philippines in agri-sector come from Mindanao. However, this is where MAP would also be interested to stress, as you have seen this also emerging in many of your discussions. This is what we call the paradox of agriculture in Mindanao. Mindanao is a land of plenty in a land, unfortunately, of poverty. As you can see on the graph or the data, Mindanao is host to 9 out of 10 poorest provinces in the country. The darker the areas, the higher poverty incidences are. These are essentially mostly located in the Bangsamoro region, areas that for several decades have went through recurring armed conflict, areas that ironically are major sources of our agricultural output, but that have not seen major economic transformation through the years. And in fact, the poor in sectors in Mindanao are the farmers and the fisher folks. This is what we always highlighted, that while there is so much in terms of agricultural productivity in the rural Mindanao, the lack of agri-processing, the lack of mechanization, the lack of value adding, be able to bring the products up the value chain, had perpetuated the situation where farmers continue to earn on a subsistence level. Then you add the dimension of our fragmented farming setup in Mindanao. 5 hectares here, 10 hectares there, 20 hectares, some 50 kilometers away, therefore eroding the competitiveness of our agricultural output because of logistics issue and lack of consolidation. But nonetheless, in spite of such challenges, this is what we are proud of in Mindanao. This is not even entire Philippines. This excludes largely Visayas and Luzon. When you talked about Cavendish bananas, these are essentially Mindanao products, where we are number 2 in the world next to Ecuador. We are top 3 in seaweeds in the world, next to China, Indonesia, and then Philippines, and then Korea. We are 4th in pineapple. We are 7th in rubber, where 99% of the country's rubber output is produced in Mindanao, in Basilan, Zamboanga, Sibugay, and North Cotabato. We are number 8 in the world in terms of. And so many of you have gone to many other countries. Next time you go there, I hope you find the opportunity to visit major grocery stores of major countries. And this is what I always do every time I travel abroad. I make an effort to take photos whether or not Mindanao products are indeed displayed in the shelves of those major countries. Validate that indeed Mindanao had been through the years able to penetrate several market destinations. And if there is one problem in one market destination, it is able to activate alternate market destinations for many of our agricultural export. And that's why with the challenge of pandemic last year, with everything else came to a halt, and we had been reverted to a different type of economic setup and economic realities. And in an effort to save more lives, our economy had to suffer because of the quarantine restrictions, the lockdowns, the protocol closures of many of the industries and the services sector, and delivered us a double-digit dip in terms of growth. But consistent with the showing of Mindanao in the last several years, we performed still relatively better at negative 5.7 versus negative 9.6 the national performance. Consistent again with our performance and showing in this years. Now, Yusek Ordonez had been keeping tab of this for several years. Agriculture has been labeled as a sunset industry. In fact, it's not so famous to be a cabinet agriculture secretary in several administrations, because you don't get to be the darling of the crowd, because there you don't have the figures, the rows of pictures to show compared when you are holding other portfolios. But during the pandemic, when all else went down, took a double-digit dip, in fact, almost, agriculture sector was the only sector that demonstrated a positive growth for us, especially here in Mindanao. Agriculture became our small spark of light and ray of hope in that otherwise dark economic reality that we face in the last years.
Asek Montenegro, if I may interrupt, I think your internet connection is failing us a bit because your presentation is very blurred.
It's blurred.
I'm not sure if that's because of the connection issues.
Yeah, probably. Is it still blurred even up to this point?
Yes, unfortunately. I remember that Miss Iris mentioned that there's a backup presentation that can be shown.
If there is one, or the other option is I can just share through let me check.
Or do we have a backup
I
copy?
can see and hear clearly.
Yes, but
it's clear here also.
It's clear with you. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably it's your connection.
Okay. Sige. Okay, anyway, yes. Please continue.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm using Prezi, and Prezi is the kind of mechanism for Zoom presentation which has a lower bandwidth requirement compared to sharing it on screen. So I was wondering why I was able to show the quality of output. But nonetheless, yes, thank you very much for pointing it out. Now, let me move on in terms of our contribution to GDP. Of course, we mirror the size of Slovenia, a little lower than Lithuania, but we are twice bigger than Cyprus and Iceland. So there is international sense to Mindanao's showing and contribution, although we only contribute about 17%. Yun nga lang, maliit ang tingin sa Mindanao from the national point of view sometimes. Yun yung lament namin. That's why in terms of priority for big ticket projects such as railways, expressways, big airports and ports, these are all skewed towards Luzon and Metro Manila, where a major contribution of our GDP is coming from and attributed to. But one very important underpinning that we've always advocated in Mindanao is to look at the situs facts. many of the multinational companies in the country are operating in Mindanao, but are only paying real property taxes because the income revenues are paid for by their headquarters in the national capitals, in BGC, in Makati, in Quezon City, and therefore reflecting performance of those cities, not of Mindanao in terms of income. So this is one part of our continuing advocacy in Mindanao in terms of the looking at the real figures in terms of our income output, so that the GDP picture of our contribution vis-a-vis national GDP should be able to reflect the true figures. And as I pointed out earlier, we continue to harness our strength in agriculture. Mindanao's comparative advantage. We don't want to compete with the assembly line of semiconductors in Calabarzon, for instance. Our strength is the agriculture sector to remain to be the country's food basket, but nonetheless, needing to scale up, needing to integrate, and needing to bring products up the value chain is where MAP definitely can provide strong support for us in terms of the many advocacies we need in Mindanao. And onwards to our advocacy in making sure that we are able to leverage on new technologies and linking our agricultural sector to these new technologies moving forward. And just a bit of another context in terms of how are we looking at what's the forecast of Mindanao this entire year of 2022, although this was before the onslaught of the hyperinflation that we are now seeing in our figures, because of course the skyrocketing prices of coal and oil, which are major components of our spending and economic activities. But nonetheless, our economic managers on the back of strong economic fundamentals are still hopeful for, including other economic experts. And ratings agencies are still expecting a favorable, desirable growth trajectory for Mindanao for the year. And coming from where we were in 2021, off the charts of pandemic, we were seeing definitely climbing up again. And this is where we hope Mindanao would be able to continue to demonstrate a better than the national performance. We have yet to put together the Mindanao because Mindanao data always comes every after first quarter or first half of the year from the PSA. And so it will take time for Minda to do the processing to be able to have a reflective Mindanao picture. But nonetheless, this is what we have always been emphasizing. In 2018 or 2021 alone, Mindanao posted a 6.1 average, higher than the national average, in fact. And quite surprisingly, laggard regions decades ago in terms of GRDP in the country were among the top performers in Mindanao last year. Caraga region at 7.2 and BARM 7.5. BARM, which in the last recent 5 years had demonstrated a consistent performance of within top 5 of GRDP among 17 regions in the country, did validating that we are starting to see and starting to reap the dividends of peace in Mindanao with investments coming in and with economic performance improving in these areas, but still needing to pursue quite a lot of effort in several other areas of the autonomous. Hence, the need for us to make sure this time around that there is a link between our corridor strategy, the connectivity, the alignment of regional focus in Mindanao. So if I bring back again this need for us to make sure that Mindanao is physically integrated and connected by way of roads, ports, airports, seaports, and including our long cherished, but still remains a dream up until today, up to this point, the Mindanao Railway, for instance. So these are big ticket projects that we had been pushing in Mindanao, ranging from land transport, roads and bridges, to airports and seaports, to Mindanao Railway. But many of these have yet to see actual implementation. Some are ongoing already and seeing completion in the next several years. We are glad that among the stalled projects in the last administration transition, the Davao-Samal Interconnector or the Davao-Samal Bridge is finally seeing its start of implementation following the inauguration or the groundbreaking, I mean, of that project, no less by President Bongbong Marcos a few weeks ago here in Davao. Again, relating those specific projects to our corridors, in the bigger context of MAP-ABCDF, we've always emphasized where is Davao in the larger picture of the 80 million market in the 4-country sub-regional cooperation. Where is Mindanao in the broader context of BIMP-IAGA and ASEAN integration? And many were asking, what's in BIMP-IAGA? What can we see in this 4-country sub-regional cooperation? Well, that area account for more than half of the world's output of 3 crops. Coconut, palm oil are produced predominantly, cornering more than half of the world's output from these areas alone, including Philippines. That area is also the world's richest biodiversity. It's the Amazon of marine biodiversity. That's why you have so much of the fisheries and aquaculture products derived from the Sulu Celebes Sea. And that's where the focus of the Coral Triangle Initiative, in fact, of ASEAN is being dedicated. And our effort in Minda to also take a bite and be part of, at least in Mindanao and Palawan, if not the entire country, of a 2.5 trillion blue economy that is already available, that is already happening, that is already delivering for us in Mindanao benefits, but have yet to be captured, to be framed under a blue economy strategy. And our planning in Mindanao is not always confined to where we are in the context of Luzon and Visayas or Philippines, but where we are in the context of our neighbors. Is Davao Port or Davao Airport comparable to Port of Pitong or the airport of Manado in North Sulawesi, Indonesia? Is Zamboanga Airport comparable to the port of Kota Kinabalu in Malaysia, Sabah? So we have to have that kind of reference and not limit Mindanao to just domestic orientation, because there is so much that we can put together and work together looking at where we are vis-a-vis our neighbors in ASEAN. And hence, putting forward many of the strategies that enabled Mindanao to leverage on national government in terms of prioritization. Davao International Airport, when it was approved early 2000, was just as big as Laguindingan Airport, a 2-bridge airport. And when we got hold of that approval, dinala namin kay the late Congressman Garcia of Davao then, that Davao is the gateway to ASEAN, gateway to BIMP-IAGA. It deserves a much bigger airport. So inakyat ulit, ni-review, and then ni-revise, ginawang 4-bridge airport, the kind of model that we have today in Davao. But yet, that Davao Airport was built to accommodate around 4 million passengers. In 2019, prior to pandemic, it was already accommodating 5 million passengers. That's why in Mindanao, we continue to keep track of where we are vis-a-vis where our neighbors are in the implementation of their big ticket projects within the BIMP-IAGA Vision 2025, which all in all is about $21 billion worth of projects implemented by the respective governments, implemented via PPP and several by development partners. And the same formula that we're also looking at for many other projects in Mindanao. So that at the end of the day, what we hope to see are completion of this project so that we can claim that our airport in Palawan, which was completed in 2019, by virtue of BIMP-IAGA as a major push, can leverage with the airport of Kota Kinabalu in serving passengers not just from Malaysia, but many other country destinations such as Europe, considering that Kota Kinabalu is a major hub. And therefore, if we have the kind of airport that is achieved, then many passengers, instead of flying out, Kota Kinabalu can drop by Palawan to see our subterranean river, our national, our UNESCO World Heritage Sites as major attractions. And so with our airports and ports and seaports, so that we are able to keep up with the challenges of times. Many of our neighbors in the BIMP-IAGA are now preparing themselves to be possible alternate to the already saturated Hong Kong and Singapore ports. And the question is, are we up to the task? Are we at par in terms of the quality of our airports or of our seaports in Mindanao vis-a-vis the ports of our neighbors in the BIMP. And this is where we draw from time to time the support of our development partners for international finance and funding for many of the projects in the BIMP. And we're glad that many countries had put forward a strong interest and had in fact highlighted a pivot, not just to ASEAN, but to BIMP-IAGA, given the recent developments in the sub-region. For instance, in the next 7 or 10 years, more or less, we're seeing a transfer of the capital of Indonesia, a 250 million population from Jakarta, which is already sinking, to a new location in Central Kalimantan or East Kalimantan city, East Kalimantan, which will become the new government center, the new capital, which is just about a few hours away from Zamboanga. So this is the kind of appreciation which we hope can be absorbed, seen at the national level. Kasi kung kami lang sa Mindanao ang nakatingin dito, and then we are centralized in terms of approval of our policies and projects, then there's not much that we would be able to accomplish. And so moving forward, to continue to push for infrastructure in Mindanao to improve our logistics and directly link the enhancement of our agriculture sector by reducing transaction costs and highlighting many of our agriculture ecozones in Mindanao. This is one way for us to address the issue of lack of consolidation and fragmented farming setup by identifying areas in Mindanao that do have the viability of being integrated in terms of specific commodity, so that we are able to achieve volumes that will warrant the viability of private sector coming up with the post-harvest or the manufacturing or the processing because of the volume providing for it already. And also a presentation of the need for existing, ongoing minerals development projects in Mindanao to be brought up to the next level, which is finding out a way by which processing and value adding can be integrated rather than Mindanao continue to produce raw ore, mineral ore to be exported to China, to Japan, and where these are being processed and converted to final product. In the last 2 years of the pandemic, Philippines, essentially Mindanao, in addition of Palawan, Rio Tupa, but majority Mindanao, was second next to Indonesia in terms of the world's export of ore, nickel ore. Nickel, which is a very essential component for massive demand for electronic vehicles. Nickel, which is needed for batteries of our gadgets, of our technological advancements. And hence, Mindanao should look at, therefore, in terms of the viability of having processing, value-adding done, rather than producing mere raw material products as with several other mineral production. Another very important reckoning that Mindanao, through Minda, as chair of the Mindanao Power and Monitoring Committee, has been keeping up of, is that we don't go back to the days of rotating brownouts in Mindanao in 2010 because of a 500 megawatt. That was by virtue of several efforts we put together in Mindanao, one of which was the establishment of a one-stop facilitation for power projects in 2014. After we launched it, DOE adopted it as a national policy. They called it the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop, and eventually became a law in 2018 or 2019, reflecting the need that in so far as investments in power, which is capital intensive, need to have the kind of facilitation that had to be worked out, considering that for a 1 megawatt hydropower alone, you need about 159 signatures from 13 agencies of the government for an entire timeline of 7 years. And so even if you have money, why go into renewable energy that requires for you a longer development time when you can just opt for fossil technology that can be available, delivering and kicking in power to the grid in a matter of 3 or less than 5. And that's exactly what happened in Mindanao in the last 7 years, when from a dominant renewable energy and cheaper electricity to a dominant fossil highlighted by coal, which is 100% imported from East Kalimantan. Therefore, today, mirroring our electricity rates with the electricity rates all across the country. We are glad that in his State of the Nation address and in several of his policy statements, the President had highlighted the use of renewable energy. Noting that here in Mindanao, based on our regular monitoring, we still have about 2,500 megawatts of available capacity, bite-sized capacities of 40 megawatts hydro, 20 megawatts biomass, 50 megawatts geothermal, and spread in several other areas, but are only needing policy push in the market for this to move forward. Because right now, the situation in Mindanao is that we have an excess of power. We are in fact in better shape than Luzon in terms of margin. But that excess of 1,000 megawatts was true in 2019. Today, it's only 800 megawatts. By our reckoning, at the growth of 4 to 7% annual growth demand in Mindanao, we translate that to around 50 to 100 to 150 megawatts every year demand in Mindanao. So that excess of 80 megawatts we have today, 800 megawatts that we have today, will be gone by 2027. So if there's no new power plants built between now and 2027, I guarantee you, we will go back to brownout days in Mindanao by 2020. Hence, for us to make renewable energy attractive versus fossil, we are pushing for specific strategies to link it directly to agriculture value chain. This is where the frame of water, energy, food nexus come into play to bring forth the link of energy to agriculture production. One business case that Minda is currently highlighting and doing market sounding with several other LGUs in Mindanao is this one example done at the height of the pandemic. Taraca, a fourth-class municipality in the poorest province of the Philippines, Mindanao del Sur within BARM, able to take out a 215 million loan from DBP for the establishment, building of 6 solar-powered irrigation projects. So if a fourth-class municipality in the poorest province of the Philippines can do it, why not second-class, third-class, first-class municipalities in areas that are similarly situated in terms of need for irrigation facilities that are not powered by diesel, which is expensive, but by sustainable means of cleaner energy. Another business case that we are set to commission online by first quarter of next year is a 1 megawatt solar power plant hybridized with battery and diesel in the towns of Sibutu and a 650 kilowatt in Sitangkay. These are the southernmost tip of the Philippines. 2 hours away, Malaysia na, 20 hours away, Buanga. These 2 towns, along with the 9 other towns in Tawi-Tawi, account for more than half of the country's output of seaweeds. But they are producing only the road-dried seaweeds because there's no electricity and there's no water. So just to give context, where those areas are, where those 2 projects funded by European Union and implemented by Minda in partnership with UNIDO and the BARM government in the province of Tawi-Tawi is located. So to give context that in terms of energization in off-grid areas, I'd like to demonstrate that we wanted to start at the farthest, the geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas, and moving towards the inner part of Mindanao. Kasi if we only attend to mainland Mindanao, we continue to be not inclusive in terms of our development. The seaweeds is very much the focus of this undertaking, because not only will it provide livelihood opportunity to the seaweed farmers, but also in terms of this being able to contribute to climate adaptation. Seaweeds farming essentially later on will form part of what we will enroll for carbon credits. And fortunately, initiatives, activities insofar as climate adaptation enrolled for carbon credits, those that are involving blue economy fetch much higher premium than those being worked out in the forest. So mas mahal ang carbon credit pag nasa tubig than nasa bundok. Therefore, will create further opportunity later on to the fisher folks and to the LGU in these areas. Similarly, conceptualized projects are also ongoing in 10 pilot areas in Mindanao, still funded by European Union. It's a small, just a small solar-powered avocado heating machine, solar-powered coffee miller, solar-powered ice-making machine in Glan, Sarangani. Because in Glan, Sarangani, and in Basilan, for instance, those are areas where you find that a block of ice is more expensive than a kilo of fish. And so therefore, this is where you are seeing the need for such facility to be able to bring our fisheries output, allowing it to reach further destination by having the availability of facilities such as ice making plants in these areas. So these are again business cases which we hope will be replicated in similarly situated off-grid areas in Mindanao. Areas that are otherwise unviable for our electric cooperatives to pursue. Alam naman natin yung electric cooperatives, kapos yan sa pera. They cannot deliver electricity up to the remotest of the remotest areas. Had to be pursued in a different manner. And through these examples of business cases that we are getting. And we are glad that Minda is part of a informal setup called the Green Task Force led by the Department of Finance, which creates an opportunity for us in Mindanao to tap into the international finance institutions such as the Green Climate Fund and the Climate Adaptation Fund for many of our energy transition and renewable energy projects here in Mindanao. Another very much concrete example of our effort to pursue blue economy came about during our Mindanao investment roadshow in Singapore, which led to the signing of an agreement of a $10 million to $100 million worth of blue economy projects through our cooperation with a Singapore-based startup, Ocean Pixel, and an Australian technology that is building underwater or ocean turbines for possible deployment to specific viable areas in Mindanao as additional source of electricity, especially delivering towards our agriculture, aquaculture, and fisheries.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. We're from 8 to 9, so we'd like him to wrap up, and then I'd like the privilege of asking this one question, and then we'll wrap it up, the formal part, and then the informal part will be up to 10. But since this is 8 to 9, we'd like the guest speaker to wrap up in a couple of minutes. Then we'll ask a key question, and then we can do the informal open forum. Is that all right, Mr. Chairman? Can I ask the
Sure,
speaker
go
to wrap
ahead.
up?
Asek, if you would be so kind as to
Sure.
maybe give us a bit of a wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm on to the last two slides, I guess, after this. And so we'll just highlight that where our focus should be therefore in Mindanao, and where later on we would find the synergy with MAP in many of our advocacies, investment promotion efforts in Mindanao to be able to realize those that we had laid down as context in the earlier part of the presentation. And to emphasize that in Mindanao, this has always been our formula. It is in Mindanao where you would be able to see it, and perhaps you Secretonians will be able to validate this, that it's in Mindanao where we have a greater coherence and collaboration with several of the national line agencies at the regional level, and with industry sectors, cacao, coffee, seaweeds, vegetables, palm oil, coconut, and several other agricultural industries in Mindanao. To demonstrate that indeed the only way forward is for us to be on the same page, the same paragraph, and the same video, so that we would be able to see realization of what we hope to accomplish in Mindanao and deliver economic transformation, especially in the rural areas. Maraming salamat po at magandang umaga.
Mr. Chairman, as stated, we start on time and we end on time. It's 9 o'clock now. That was one heck of a nice presentation. We'd like just to say a couple of things, then we'll close it officially, then we'll do the informal meeting, but usually that's even more important. Anyway, the bottom line is this. When I was USEC of DTI, I saw the need for agriculture. And when I saw use of agriculture, I saw it was really bad. Then when I became Secretary of the Office of President under flagship projects, I found out two things using a presidential perspective where ASEC Manila was working. First one is agriculture is neglected, and number two, Mindanao is neglected. And those two come into this talk. No? So right after that, we'll ask him, what can we here do for that? And then we'll have other questions. But we want to do that at the first part of the informal forum. So on that note, we'd like to close this session. And ASEC Montenegro, can you stay up to 10 o'clock? Up to what time can you stay with us?
Yes, I can say up to 10. No problem.
Excellent.
My
So
next
let's
meeting will be at 10 o'clock. So it's
now,
all right.
and then yeah, we start with that very important question answer now, which basically is we are here, no? We are here with certain talents and experience God has given us. What can we do that's not being done yet? But that will start the second session. So, Mr. Chair, it's now 9 o'clock. I guess you can close the first formal session, and we go on to the second one. But first we have to close this session. Mr. Chairman, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, President Ernie, and thank you once again, ASEC Montenegro, for a very informative presentation. I personally was able to hear of BIMPEAGA during an exchange program with Taiwan. I was with some members from Minda who were part of the delegation, and they had talked to us about that. So it's a very interesting development, and I hope it's something that will push. Okay, so we close now our formal session, and we'd like to do so first by expressing our our gratitude to ASEC Romeo Montenegro, if we may show. So the Management Association of the Philippines, Agribusiness and Countryside Development Foundation, with our special partner institutions, senior special partner institutions, and on behalf of all of our members, present this certificate of appreciation to Romeo M. Montenegro for his invaluable support in the advocacy and promotion of agribusiness and countryside development, and for his commendable and unselfish services rendered to this foundation as our resource speaker, given this 8th day of November 2022 on our 31st weekly online meeting. Signed myself as chairman and Ernesto Ordonez as our president. Okay, so let's give ASEC Montenegro a big round of applause. Thank you very much. And do we have details for our next session next week? Or not yet? Okay. So we have our session for next week. For our 42nd session on 2022, we have Kenaf Fiber Production and Processing by Engineer Ramil Barcelona. No relation to me. I have checked. There are quite a few Barcelonas throughout the country. But anyway, he is the OIC for Fiber Utilization and Technology. So for the Philippine Fiber Industry Development Authority. So please join us next week for this. The Philippine textiles industry and the Philippine fiber industry is also a very underrated and underappreciated, I think, sector of agriculture here in the Philippines, which I think we can really take a look at.